A lot of interest around Bitcoin and blockchain. What does it do for IoT? See some heads nodding. Also, during the introductions, saw that there was people that are from the software side and the application side, as well as the hardware side of things. So, naturally, by nature, coming from the connectivity side, it's kind of interesting to make the jump over into blockchain and Bitcoin, and I'll cover that as the reason why. So, just really quickly, it's just an agenda of what we're planning on covering. We are going to start off at the basics and build up, so please bear with me for just a second for the people that aren't aware of what it is to begin with, and then we're going to get a little deeper from there. So we'll talk about what is Bitcoin, what is blockchain, then it gets into something a little more interesting. What are other distributed ledger technologies that are competing with Bitcoin, and specifically where do they play within IoT, and then we'll talk about some use cases, and from there, I also want to do just a little short exercise and get some interaction within the audience, and then give you some resources. So presentation deck will be shared after today. So some resources were added at the very end as just some different ideas of where to get information from along your learning and journey. So what is Bitcoin? So let's start out with just a high-level definition. So Google defines it as, first of all, can everybody hear me in the back? And can you read the slides?
Oh.
Okay. I was a little concerned about the resolution. So just really quick, a type of digital currency, which obviously we know, in which encryption techniques are used to regulate the generation of units of currency and verify the transfer of funds operating independently of a central bank. So at its core, it was generated back in 2009. We'll get into a little bit of the history in just a second, by a guy by the name of Satoshi. It was a white paper that just happened to find its way to the internet. From there was one of the gentlemen, Mike Hearn, that is actually a Google developer, that kind of picked it up and started having some conversations with this guy, Satoshi. Now, what's interesting is nobody knows who Satoshi is. Nobody has ever had pronversation with him other than just email exchanges. So it's very interesting that somebody would put out a technology that is as comprehensive as this and not want any credit for it whatsoever. Obviously, there could be some implications towards him, towards the financial institutions and many others. But so it's just to let you know, an adoption has taken place of a technology from somebody that we have absolutely no idea who this person really is in real life. And so in the very beginning, Mike had some email exchanges with Satoshi, which he has since gone dark, and nobody has any clue who he is or where he is. So just a little history there. So the purpose behind it in the beginning was peer-to-peer transactions. And so Satoshi and Mike, in the very infancy of it, they had coins that they were trading back and forth to each other just to prove the concept. So it was, how do I trade one thing to one other person and do so without having anybody involved from a middleman perspective or even any governing agency? So there's no centralized bank involved. There's not a centralized ledger involved. Everything is distributed among multiple different nodes across the internet. So cryptography enables cryptocurrency. So obviously cryptocurrency is the big thing right now. It's a big buzzword. And what does it actually mean? Well, a couple of different takes on it. My personal take is it causes a bunch of confusion because of the word currency being involved in the name. Really, more than anything, it is an encrypted way of trading assets from one place to another place without a level of trust being between two people. So the way I explained it to my wife, because that's my gauge, right? Because she's a nurse and has nothing to do with technology. And so how I explained it to her was, if you had a $20 bill in your hand and you walked up to somebody and you just said, here's a $20 bill. Doesn't matter why, I just want to give you a $20 bill. I don't know you, you don't know me, there's no trust involved. I just want to hand you money. And that's really the whole premise behind everything, is how do I have a person-to-person or peer-to-peer transaction, specifically we'll get into that on the IoT side, but without knowing who the other person is, and how do I do so anonymously if I choose to do so. So each Bitcoin, obviously we've probably seen it on the news by now, Bitcoin's rising, hovering right around the $1,800 mark, US dollars per one Bitcoin. So a lot of people are just like, I can't get into Bitcoin even if I wanted to, because it's going to cost me $1,800 per coin. Not necessarily true. So just to put a premise behind that, ahead of time, Satoshi had the foresight or foreknowledge to know that at some point this thing is going to be extremely valuable. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break it out into multiple, so think of a pie that has the opportunity to be broken out into 100 million pieces to make up one whole pie. And so because of that, now I can transfer a very, very small fraction. It's actually infinitely divisible, but currently it's 100 million, 100 million pieces per pie, if you will, of Bitcoin. And so a lot of people have used this in multiple different ways, even to buy other cryptocurrencies. Just to say that, to say, just because you see what's happening in the market doesn't mean that you can't become a player, because you can become a player for a fraction of what it actually is per Bitcoin. And the real value is in the network itself. So this is where we get into a little bit more of the blockchain discussion. So the value, there was a comment that was made on Facebook a couple of weeks ago from a financial advisor, and he made the comment, watch out for the Bitcoin bubble. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not necessarily a fair statement, because you're looking at it from a financial perspective of Bitcoin being a currency and having value based on the currency, which is extremely volatile, right? And so it was like, I have to, from a technologist perspective, I have to at least let people know what's really going on behind the scenes. Because from a financial perspective, hey, I agree. And the way I explained it was, we're at the very infancy of this thing. From cryptocurrency to distributed ledger technologies, we're at the very beginning of the adoption period. It's actually been around since 2009. White paper hit the market late 2008. 2009 is whenever we started seeing some activity. And so it's taken a while for it to take adoption, but in 2015 is really when it exploded. And I'm glad we have IBM representative in here, because they've also put a lot of money and a lot of resources into distributed ledger technology, specifically around the blockchain, if you will. But you have to look at it beyond what is just the monetary value of the quote-unquote coin that's on the market. What is the real value is in the network, and how it's bringing information to and from point A to point B, and doing so in a cryptographic way to where information is stored forever. So think about it as a storage place that nobody can get into unless they have the ability to get into it, because you gave them the ability, and be able to store information. So think of, I use this example, so think of multiple different pieces of paper on a desk. You take those pieces of paper, which are your information, and you put them inside of a container, okay? During the process of what they call data mining is whenever I now take that package and I put it inside of a secure hashed package and put it out on the ledger. So your checkbook register, in essence, if you want to think of it that way, your checkbook ledger is out on the public World Wide Web, internet, whatever phrase you want to use, but nobody can get into it unless they have permissions to. And you distribute that among the applications. All right, so let's get into the blockchain piece of it. And this is really where the whole value of the conversation takes place. So distributed ledger technology, number one, it is what it sounds like. So in the past, we've had, think of it like a star topology. You've got one ledger. So let's say you're looking within a company. You've got one server that has all of the information about each one of the individual people within that company. That goes out to all the different nodes. But if that one server fails, what happens? The information is gone. So a lot of people, the majority of the time, best practice obviously is to have multiple copies of what happens, within that ledger, so to speak, of all the employees, everything that's going on. So if you go into, a SAP installation, you're not going to see one server in the enterprise. You're going to see multiple different servers, and you're going to see them geographically dispersed across either the country or the world, depending on the size of the company. That's exactly what distributed ledger does. So it takes those ledgers and it puts it across all the different nodes that are trusted nodes within the network. And so now there's no single point of failure. So if one particular ledger decides to fail, that particular server, it fails, not a big deal. That same copy of the ledger is on other computers. So this node comes back up, it gets another copy of the predetermined good copy of the ledger, and it replaces it with the one that crashed. So obviously it's robust, so everybody can participate, and actually they're encouraged to. So if you want to do some searching around Bitcoin mining, you can better understand, what that concept is and what it looks like. The second thing is obviously security. So there's keys that are passed between people to where you have a private key and a public key. So information stored within those public and private entities to where not everybody has access to this information. So it brings a little level of trust and allows for adoption quickly. And then obviously reliability. So if you've got ledgers all over the world, then reliability also becomes a big factor because now you've got multiple different copies of this ledger all over the place. And the whole premise behind this is a way of doing transactions. So we'll get into the IoT specific part of it, but just think of it from just a very high level. How do I make a transaction happen and do it securely from point A to point B is the whole premise behind this technology. And then the ability to launch in a private and a public instance. So if you are a large organization, you're going to obviously have the question, why do I want my information, whether it's hashed or not? It doesn't matter, it's irrelevant. So let's take healthcare for an example with HIPAA. HIPAA comes in, they freak out. No, can't happen. No way this is going to be on a public type of an entity. It has to be private. So there's pros and cons to using public versus private. So is anybody, am I tracking with anybody? Anybody have any questions so far?
So can you choose between public and private, and what are the pros and cons of choosing one over the other? And do you have to have both, or?
Okay, good question. And one or the other.
You have to have one or the other?
So what happens, and I'm going to do it in the cloud so everybody
Okay.
hears. What happens when you choose the private key infrastructure in Bitcoin/blockchain and the private key owner suddenly forgets the key or it becomes deceased, which is a huge issue in blockchain.
Correct.
Because the issue is, of course, when the key is lost, okay, the storage vessel is locked forever.
Correct.
Not quite.
What?
Not quite. You actually set up your proxy keys.
Yes,
You
there
don't
are
want
ways.
anybody to think
That's
that
right.
if it's lost, it's lost. It's not. Doesn't have to be that way. There's revocability and replaceability based on by designated votes within the blockchain to replace it.
Right, inside
Exactly.
the 16. Yeah. Inside the 16. Yeah, 6,000. Yeah. Got it. Understood.
Okay, so my answer both of those. So number one, it has to be public or private. Can't be both. Okay.
Oh, it can't be both?
Can't be both. Now there are networks that are coming out right now to where you can cross-chain, do transactions cross-chain. Still in its infancy, so I don't want to confuse you. Simplicity, one or the other. But there's ways of getting around it, kind of like there's ways of getting around a lost wallet or a lost private key.
Okay, so can you have a beneficiary? Like, say I die, I want to give it to my husband or whatever, my dogs. So can you designate a beneficiary?
Yes.
Okay.
You can. And so we'll get into that in a piece called contracts.
Okay.
Okay. So the public versus private, pros and cons. So a couple of different things. On the public side of things, so let's take Hyperledger for an example, since we have IBM here. So if you were to build an application on Hyperledger, there's already other applications that are out there. So the purpose behind that and the benefit is if I'm a public company or if I'm a company and I want to put something on the public blockchain, I have access to resources that have already been written, okay? So I can now go in and access applications which are called DApps or distributed applications or decentralized applications. I can now access applications that are on their public blockchain in order to fulfill my application's needs. So it makes it quicker and easier and also a lot more cost effective. On the private side of things, you have to build everything from scratch. I mean, you literally are like just standing up your own private cloud and everything has to be built from beginning to end. All the contracts, and all the other applications that'll be used through all your different applications that you build. So there's pros and cons. I would say the pro on the public side, it's inexpensive and you get to utilize other resources. On the private side, it's more expensive and it takes a little bit more time to build.
But isn't the whole point of the public ledger about trust between entities?
Correct.
Because if I control my own private cloud, then I get to choose, the level of trust, right? So maybe there's good applications for that internal thing. and
There
whatnot.
can be.
But if I'm using this as a way to conduct transactions with other businesses, then I would want to be on the public ledger because that's what enables the trust.
Completely agree, yes.
So to exchange stuff, you need public, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Okay.
so if this is highly distributed, like globally even,
Correct.
and I throw 50,000 transactions across the world at the same time, how do the ledgers know what the most recent reality is? Like, how are they all staying in sync?
How they
when
chain
they're
it.
so highly distributed.
Correct. So whenever they're going, so there's checks and balances along the way. And so they all, call it voting if you will. So they all come together as a consensus and say which one is the most current. So now you've got multiple thousands of nodes that are all doing checks and balances for you, other than just one or two people. Because if it was only one or two people, I could
Isn't that a lot of
probably.
traffic? Like,
It is a
how
lot
do
of
you-
traffic,
You can
absolutely.
totally storm everything all the time.
100%.
Yeah.
And that
That's
is.
actions, so it's not as bad.
It's not the whole data.
Not the whole
It's
data.
just a pointer in a secure envelope.
Okay, yeah.
It's
But
still,
it is a lot of traffic.
it is. It's still a lot of traffic, but you are just sending information, the hashed information along the way. So there are some limitations if you want to look at it from that perspective, and we'll talk about
Maybe the
some.
type of transaction manages that, like if you can't do like a big, like nothing is just flooded data, and I'm just thinking of the timing of it, because if I try to, cash a check in China
But it
right
doesn't
after I
need to
cash a check.
happen on all nodes simultaneously, it just propagates.
Correct.
Right,
Right,
so as long as it's on some nodes,
You
then
can
you're good.
withdraw the same $20
But you
from all
can't.
those different locations, because they don't know that you already withdrew it somewhere else.
So that happens within the contract piece. So once my money leaves my wallet, then it's deducted and it can't be spent until after it's already been, so call it rectified or reconciled. So until it gets reconciled, it gets locked up.
So there is a single point of truth of the wallet in the universe. It's not like everywhere.
No.
It is everywhere.
Okay. I don't mean.
It is
to be
everywhere.
I mean,
I was gonna say, let's
uneducated.
discuss offline, and I think Craig will probably be able to help you out with that question. Any other questions at this point? Yes, Craig.
I mean, the whole point of the blockchain is that it's a completely trustless network, right? So if you're going to do a private blockchain, aren't you kind of losing some of the advantages of blockchain to begin with? Because you're trying to keep your blockchain to yourself, and if somebody manages to hack into it, you're back to square one in some sense.
That's a very fair statement. And so that truly is from the beginning, if you want to look at it from the purity, if you will, of the whole technology, it is public.
Right.
That is the whole premise behind it.
Right.
However, you're still going to have people that are going to go private just because of it is who it is,
Okay.
for whatever their reason is, unfortunately. So, what does the distributed ledger landscape look like? And this is where we start getting into the application piece of IoT. So, everybody knows blockchain, but very few people know distributed ledger, which is the type of technology that it is. And there's some that are coming out that are a little bit more focused around IoT specific versus just being able to do transactions with monetary value or assets, if you will. And so, just really quickly, just to add on the top, so blockchain, obviously the most common one known today. There is another one, has anybody ever heard of Ethereum?
Yes.
What?
So Ethereum is actually an application, okay? So think of it as, now I've got the base layer of the foundation, now I'm going to build applications on top of that. And those applications serve multiple different purposes, right? And so one of those within the community is, how do I have a simple computer that's a client that is blockchain enabled, but allows for third-party applications to be able to connect to it through this one computer interface. That's being developed actually right now as we speak, and it'll be ready towards the end of 2017 as a blockchain gateway. So if you think about Wi-Fi, everybody in their house has a Wi-Fi router. Think of it as a blockchain gateway as to how I get applications to talk to Ethereum, okay, which is an application. Ripple, which if anybody follows any of the cryptocurrency, Ripple has made a huge ripple. And unfortunately, I had the opportunity several years back to make an investment in Ripple whenever it was in its very, very infant stages. And because I didn't understand what was going on and thought it was just a bunch of hocus pocus, I passed on that. And as of yesterday, was really, really kicking myself hard for passing on that opportunity, because they're now sitting in number 2, bouncing back and forth between one of the other cryptocurrencies, or Ethereum, or Ether, if you will. And so the purpose behind Ripple, bank-to-bank instant transactions. So think about if you have somebody that you want to send money to today, and they're over in Germany, just as an example. If you do that, there's a wire transfer that takes place. Multiple banks along the way are taking a cut of that money that you're sending. And so fees are being assessed along the way of that transaction. So having worked for an international company and them having to send my check to the US every month or a couple of times a month, there were fees that they were having to pay on top of me just having my wages. And so it was fees for them to transfer money. So Ripple's whole intention is to go between, let's say, Capital One and Chase Bank, to be able to go from point to point and have it be strictly between those two banks only, no middlemen. So fees go down significantly. And so if I wanted to send that money to the person in Germany that I know, I send them $20, it might cost me 1% of that, theoretically. And so that's the whole premise behind Ripple. And I only give you this just high level insight because I know these are some different names that are out in the market right now, just to kind of give you an idea of where they play and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Next one that's very, or well, I'll say lesser. Yes,
Here, I just want to add that
Sure.
for the topic of private versus public,
Yes.
Ripple is a great example of who has created a private blockchain network as well.
Inside banks.
Inside the banks. So
That's a good point.
7 or 8 banks or 15 banks are transacting with each other, but the rest of the world does not necessarily need to know what's going on.
But it's private in the sense of the banks have agreed to create a private network between them, so they have ownership and trust each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they don't want some guy sitting in Russia
Right.
looking at what's going on.
It's what Swift wanted to do in the first place. Right.
And thank you, Tahir, for that. So just for those that are watching the video, Tahir made a very good point about the difference in public and private, with Ripple being a prime example of a private blockchain. So obviously, since it is bank to bank, you don't want everybody to be able to see those transactions or to even know that they're taking place. So thank you, Tahir, for that. And then R3, they have a product called Porta. So it's transactions between regulated financial institutions. So kind of the same concept as Ripple, but this is between regulated financial institutions. So let's say that Merrill Lynch wants to be able to do transactions with, American Express. They can do so within this private nature. FlowChain, this is where we start talking IoT now. So inherently within blockchain, as you pointed out earlier, there are some challenges long-term when we get to the billions and billions of devices on the network about how do we update the ledger, how much network traffic is actually going around needlessly, if you will. So it's kind of like the difference between TCP and UDP. TCP, very succinct. I got a destination. I'm gonna do my thing. UDP, they're just the person that sits out there and talks all day. And so it's kind of the same thing with network traffic, especially whenever we talk about the IoT space. And so I forget your name, but you mentioned earlier you work with LoRa projects. So with LoRa projects or other low power radio networks, very, very, very tiny amounts of data, because it has to be because of the type of network that it's built on. So how do we have something that only sends 10 bits of data, also be able to do a transaction on a blockchain type of a network? It's distributed ledger now that we know the difference. So specifically distributed ledger, and to do so in a lightning fast transaction, because now I'm not transferring money, now I'm just transferring sensor information, which still has value, but we don't see it as a cryptocurrency. So now I want temperature, humidity, light sensors, all the different things that we measure from a sensor perspective, and I want that to be on a network that's super, super fast. So I don't want to have to worry about a 10-minute transaction time, approximately, to do a blockchain transaction. I need that to be right now, because if I've got a SCADA network out there and that sensor is wanting to send back pressure or temperature for a pipeline, I need to know that right now, and my SCADA system needs to be able to make a decision based on that information. So how do we do that? But also still do it in a secure manner and allow everybody to play. So FlowChain, brand new to the market, and these resources are listed on the page at the very end, so you can look up their website and kind of get a feel for what they do in their white paper. And then IoTA is another one. So I specifically put their website link because there's a lot of different IoTA stuff out there. So just don't get it confused and make sure you're looking at the right stuff. So it becomes very interesting because the whole concept behind IoTA is everything is now involved. Now I don't have to worry about all the mining servers that are out there that are completing my transactions. I want the things involved. So I want everybody to play a piece, and for that, there's no fees. So now, instead of having a blockchain transaction through Bitcoin that you send money from one place to another, and I charge you a fee to do so, now I'm talking about sensor data. I don't want fees on my sensor data because me as a service provider, I only want to charge, let's say, $100 one-time fee, a throwaway computer or throwaway device, and at the end of the day, I don't want you to have to pay for any traffic other than whatever it is that you're using. Yes, sir.
So there's no mining.
Yes and
None
no.
in the Bitcoin sense.
Correct.
But and I'm not trying to stump the presenter,
Sure.
I'm no expert, but part of the Bitcoin blockchain that increases the level of security is the miners that participate in the concept of mining.
Correct.
How does
Now
that-
it's just notes where the engine or the virtual engine runs. So the mining is a dedicated activity in Bitcoin. When you move into some of the newer coins, it's actually going to be in the nodes, and the nodes handle the processing and the algorithms for consensus.
Absolutely. So to put it in perspective, so if I want to be a Bitcoin miner, then I have a dedicated computer, so to speak, that typically run in Linux, obviously, and it's processor specific. If you want to really get into the space, you buy a computer basically that's specific for Bitcoin mining, okay? And so those are, anybody can buy them. You can buy them off of Amazon, wherever, plug them into the network, and now you participate as a miner. So as participating as a miner, you also earn what they call hash cash. So every time that I create or complete that mathematical equation, I get paid for it in Bitcoin. Okay, it's a fraction, obviously. On the IoTA side, now it's embedded in the devices. So now all the devices, every one of the devices, are involved in completing those transactions. Does that make sense?
So the device tries to compute the hash values?
Correct. And so what?
it's like an autonomous sort of you've got AI or something that's.
They have to get a majority of the machines to agree on it.
Right.
And then that's
But the
yes, autonomous.
machines operate, the machines try to compute the hash. They're set up that way, and that's their mission, and they do it without intervention.
That's exactly right. Exactly.
So all the end nodes need to do this, or is there a gateway that would aggregate this?
It's all the end nodes that are doing this.
Because
And
IoT
so-
is about low power, low
Right.
cost. I don't see how this
Correct.
works with
Yeah, the
IoT.
sensors can't do this.
The sensors won't be doing this.
The sensors don't have the.
It's a
memory
microprocessor.
or the processing.
So this,
So it would be a gateway.
It's a gateway, right?
yeah, it'd be considered a gateway in a traditional sense,
Because, I mean,
yes.
that's the other thing that's always perplexed me about blockchain for low power, low bandwidth networks, okay? You're not gonna be doing those type of transactions when you have 12 bytes that you're trying to transmit every 15 minutes.
I mean, it gets into the issue of security on an IoT basis, right? One of the reasons why people are talking about replacing IPv6 is because of the fact that the sensors don't have the memory profile or the processing to handle, or the power to handle the 128 character, nomenclature of IPv6. That's why expressive is being, or 4D, are being looked at as replacements of IPv6.
Exactly.
IPv6 hasn't replaced IPv4 yet.
IPv6 came out in 99, so I don't think that.
I was gonna say, I think V6 already missed its prime. But no, that's a very valid point. And so, in traditional sense, yes, the gateway that has the processing power would be the one that would be completing
So
the transactions.
this is the challenge, you've still got that weak link to the sensor part network, right? You can't really do blockchain all the way down.
But they're limited by the gateway. They're limited, the security breach.
I know, but
is at
it's
least-
now a different security mechanism. You don't really have end-to-end blockchain, right?
just have to design more gateways, Cisco would love
It's
that.
also what you're trying to protect.
What's that?
What was that?
You're trying to protect the more data, not the data.
But, I mean,
Is swap
let's
still
say the
with Illumina?
bandwidth and power was not an issue, okay? It'd be really nice if you could say this packet of sensor data is known to be true all the way from the sensor all the way back online, right? But now we're saying we can't really do
You
that.
can't do it in real time, you can only go from chain to chain.
Yeah.
Or block to block, I'm sorry.
Yeah, block to block, there you go. And so,
Kurt,
yes,
let me just add one piece to this, it's probably relevant to everybody today. Last night at several of the meetings going on right now in New York this week, of which several thousand people are at, they created something called the Trusted IoT Alliance, which is the first time that you've actually had blockchain consortia with some of the major players, both in the public and private and sensors, all come together on what the open source and the registries and the protocols are going to be. So as you see the reports coming out in the next few days, Trusted IoT Alliance.
excellent, thank you for that. And so, what does all this mean for IoT? So let's get to the meat of the actual conversation here. So obviously, creation of peer-to-peer business models. So the easiest way for me to explain this is Uber transformed the way we did transportation because they had an application, they owned no assets, but their evaluation was astronomical for somebody that owns zero assets. So what happens whenever you implement something like a smart contract is now you become Uber, yourself as an individual, or yourself as a company can become whatever it is that you want to be. So whenever you start looking at business models, now I can do transactions between two people with a digital contract where conditions are met and funds are released. And so now let's say if you have a vacation property, instead of using Airbnb, now you could actually advertise your rental property on whatever website you choose to, and you're actually using blockchain technology in order to keep all the information secure and be able to unlock the device for however long period of time. So there's some very interesting concepts around how to do peer-to-peer business modeling and what that's really going to do for the enterprise side more so than it is on the person-to-person. The thing is, though, the person-to-person is where the power's at. So let's talk about smart contracts for just a quick second. So let's look at it from this perspective. A contract today is a paper that is enforced by law, and you have to get attorneys involved and all kinds of fun stuff in order to write a contract because it's got to have the right language in it that you don't understand, and potentially some loopholes in it that are going to be gotchas. And you know, it's a complicated process. Even to do an NDA is a complicated process for some people. So what if we could do all of that in a digital format with conditions and not have to worry about attorneys, number one, but number two, if you didn't want to, number two is that I can do everything electronically to where it's between me and another person and nobody else needs to know anything about it. So let me give you an example. So this is a trusted, non-trusted, if you will, a trusted method of between two people that don't even know each other. So there's different levels of trust that you can have, even within this whole space to where you can say, I trust this person a lot, so I'm not going to worry about how many different times that you go back and you validate that transaction. Or you can say, I don't know who this person is, I have no recollection of their past, or anybody that they're connected to. I want you to make sure that this transaction is real. And so you can go through and authenticate that transaction multiple different times, okay? So contracts in place, let's say that, we'll use temperature as an example, and IBM has actually, I highly recommend going and watching the little video that they have on their page. I believe it's on the Watson page, if I'm not mistaken, the blockchain page. But it's basically how does it work from end to end with a smart contract and what does that mean? So let's say that you're purchasing goods as a grocery. So you want to make sure that the goods along the way from the time that they're harvested till the time they get there obviously stay within a certain temperature range. And if they get outside of that range, then I don't either one, I have to inspect it before I accept it, or I'm not going to accept it at all, depending on what it is. Seafood, obviously extremely critical that it stays within a certain temperature range. Let's think about pharmaceuticals. You know, if medication, some medication is refrigerated, if it goes outside of its temperature range for a certain period of time, it's no longer a good medication. And so as a pharmacist, I want to make sure that my product that I receive and I'm paying for is a good product that I'm going to resell to my end user or my customer. So a smart contract enables you to be able to do that, and I'll show you the value of blockchain. So in the beginning, you've got manufacturing process, and at the time that it's getting ready for delivery, there's a tag that's associated with X product, whatever that product is. And let's say that on that sensor, like Craig has these sensors, let's say that it's measuring temperature and it's measuring light and measuring humidity. 3 simple little KPIs. And this now goes on a ship because it's coming over across international waters. And during that shipping process, I obviously want to make sure that it stays within the temperature range. And so what happens is that sensor, it's typically we would think, well, you can't do that unless you're using a satellite because you don't have connectivity. That's not true, because now you've got enough memory on a microprocessor on a single, basically a single chip computer, to be able to monitor all those increments on the way from point A to point B. At point B, that system then says, okay, you stay within your limits. I'm going to accept it, no questions asked. Everything is good, no issue. So then it goes from sea to land. So now I'm in the back of a truck, okay? Reefers on the truck, we see them running around here all the time, refrigeration units. Let's say that during the transportation from where it picks it up to the grocery store, there's a failure on the reefer. So along the way, it goes outside of its temperature range. Even if it's only 1 or 2 degrees, doesn't matter, especially if it's medication. And so whenever it gets there, now whenever that sensor checks in, I see, hey, wait a minute, you didn't meet your contract obligations. So now either 1, I can turn away the product, or 2, I can inspect it before I accept it. It's up to you. But here's the beauty behind everything. Since it's on the blockchain and since you have multiple people involved, everybody gets to stay informed along the way. So it's not a closed system to where I'm the only one that has access. Everybody has the ability to get access to this if you give them the ability to retrieve it. So let's think of an application that's running on a smartphone or a computer. Everybody has access to the data that's on the blockchain if you give it to them, okay? So the beauty behind that is now there's an argument. No, it stayed within its temperature range. No, actually, you didn't even look at your application. And so now you can go back from a service level agreement or SLA, you can go back and fault the person or find the person where it became out of spec. And so it starts adding some different things along the chain of custody of logistics and things of that nature. So obviously a pop-up business anywhere in the world, Peter?
So if you have the ubiquitous ability to grant the rights to access the data, even though you can track who is accessing the data, doesn't that actually add an element of insecurity to the entire chain, since most breaches are actually human-based?
Very good point. So yes, it can.
What?
Probably read-only.
Doesn't matter, you still have access to the data.
So there's 2 things about that. Yes, you're absolutely right, and that actually has already happened. So it wasn't the distributed ledger technology, it was the application. And so Pete actually has a very valid point. If you want to, you can go back and look it up. It happened to Ethereum, and there's a bunch of nasty stuff happened because of that. So it is at the application piece of it, with the human error, obviously, that you can have those types of interactions that cause issues. Now, here's the pro to that. The pro to that is it is a distributed ledger. So there's no single point of failure. So now I can go back and find out who was accountable and who was the reason that there was a failure, that there was an intrusion, or if there was a security threat.
Security and tracking.
And also, you're not going to go and modify all of them, right?
No.
You can't.
No.
So, if there's inconsistencies, you would know about it.
That's exactly
This is
right.
the after presentation conversation.
Right.
Yeah, this is the application of the presentation. That's right. So, and this is where Craig makes his money. He can help you with that. And so, a pop-up business, obviously I can go anywhere in the world today and accept PayPal. Whatever it is I want to accept method of payment, it's going to cost me something. So now imagine being able to accept payments and it not cost you the same types of a fee. Now, the other thing too, I don't have to worry about currency. It's single currency around the world. Bitcoin's Bitcoin. Ether is Ether. All these currencies stay native wherever it is. Doesn't matter because I don't have a government that's controlling that. Now, obviously, whenever you cash out, that's a different story. But one thing, just really quick, a couple more things. Enablement of micropayments. This can be, you can debate this if you want to because of the amount of traffic that it takes to settle a 10-cent transaction, if it's worth it or not. The point is that it enables it to happen. And so in reality, let's think that you're a blogger and you make your living off of writing blog posts and advertisements and things of that nature. But has anybody ever gone to the Wall Street Journal page to try to read an article? You get the first paragraph and it says, sign in to read more?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a monthly recurring revenue for Wall Street Journal, right? So you could do the exact same thing with you yourself. So let's say that there's platforms out there, is the only reason why I'm mentioning this isn't hypothetical, this is happening, to where you write a blog post, and if that's of value to you, then you can give it a thumbs up, which accrues money over time. So let's say that every time that somebody likes your post, it puts 10 cents in your account because it was a good post. And so now you start thinking about it from a business model perspective. Now I can start getting paid for my creativity, for my way of thinking, and being able to accept monetary denominations, if you will, if you want to look at it from that perspective, for the things that I'm putting forth. And in the real-time value of trade, has anybody in here ever wondered what the value of a dollar is whenever you hand a dollar from one person to the other? I mean, a dollar is a dollar. It changes. That's exactly right. But that's never been a mindset of ours because to us, it's a $10 bill is a $10 bill. It's worth $10. In reality, it's not worth $10. So what happens whenever you start plugging into Bitcoin is that now you can make transactions based on real-time values. So if you want to set something to where, let's say that Bitcoin's $1,800 a coin today, but it's $1,500 a coin tomorrow, in real time, I can raise and lower my transaction based off of what it is for that day. Now you can obviously do that with dollars, but that's not the way people think today. But it is the way people are thinking in the future. Question? Pete?
Isn't that akin to inflation though?
Can be, yeah.
Then you have what's called stable.
What?
Can you set conditions?
Yes, you can set conditions.
Okay.
SEA, which is a stable peg crypto coin, when you need to be non-inflationary with the transaction.
I don't know.
Very valid point.
Can you repeat what Craig said for the recording?
So,
Yeah.
sure. So he's talking about stabilization. So stabilization is obviously a big issue right now with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But there's coins that are being specifically put into use or put into circulation, if you will.
Because the value of the U.S. dollar versus Bitcoin is that the U.S. dollar is the actual standard basis of currency worldwide, where all other currencies are actually measured against.
It moves,
I mean, they're
with each
surety.
other.
They all fluctuate,
They're all
right?
relative, right?
But it's all relative. But from in international banking, all non-crypto transactions, on an intercompany basis, happen in dollars. They don't have
generally in contracts in dollars, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why he gave the example of the Bitcoin falling from 1800 to 1500, right? You said. So how do you set the value based on that? Like say, I'm selling something on eBay, and I want to set the price. You're saying, right?
So I wouldn't use eBay as an example
Okay.
because obviously being what it is. But it's up to you if you want. So if there's a predetermined amount that you're going to say that this is going to be 0.25 Bitcoin period in the story, it is what it is. So it's the same thing as being able to go and say, look at the menus of the meals that you purchased this morning. Those don't fluctuate day to day. It is what it is. It's predetermined. No matter what the value, the value of the dollar is, it is what it is.
Or you cash out.
There are a lot of issues.
Or what you said earlier, Les, your
Bitcoin
application can
as the supply
fluctuate
of
post the
Bitcoin
price based on the price of
It
Bitcoin.
can,
Okay.
yes.
So setting a
It's up to you.
It's your business rule, right?
Yeah.
It's all based on the business logic that you want to use, but it can be enforced through contracts, to
Okay.
your point.
It's like when Venezuela increased their money supply by 7% and incurred 93% inflation.
What kind of cryptography is the basis of this?
So everything's using a 256-bit hash.
Okay. Is it SHA?
Shot
Yeah.
in.
So you talked about getting your money out, or you kind of alluded to that. How do you cash out of this system, any of these systems?
There's entities that can help you do
Is there a
that.
broker?
But there will be fees at that point, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's-
Yes.
I mean,
There are fees
there's no
to,
free
there's
anything.
fees to buy in and fees to get out. You're absolutely
There's no free
right.
lunch.
And then how does the
Those are the
US
money
government
gateways.
view this in terms of tax evasion?
Not
Does
that-
that
Money
What was your
remain
question?
so secret?
Very valid point,
And
and
money
actually,
laundering and all of those other things, that's the reason Bitcoin had such a bad reputation.
All the
yes,
federal
and
requirements.
there's
You just have to
things
cash
that
out
are,
in the right country.
Well, that's the point, right? So all the money goes to the Bahamas or
That's why
whatever.
Apple has its money overseas, right?
so.
Like
so
in the
they are
Caymans,
working
you
on
cash out in the
entities
Caymans or
that-
something?
That are going to be helping
The
with
Isle of Man?
anti-money laundering and things of that nature. Unfortunately, in the beginning, yes, there was because, I mean, it wasn't mainstream, so everything was, kind of behind the scenes, and people were using it as a form of, or a way to do transactions without anybody knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anonymously, yeah.
Now, I will say there was, if I'm not mistaken, it was yesterday that the IRS requested access to some of the blockchain information, and they were denied quickly. So it's, what is it going to look like long-term? Great question, and we'll just have to sit back
That's
and.
the financial piece of it. The transactional piece is still a really great tool for,
Absolutely.
for all these other applications.
And so that's whenever I come back to using it as, look at it from an application of assets versus currencies. And so if this glass of water means something to you and your napkin means something to me, it's a mutual trade based off of what we decide through a contract. And so if you hand me that napkin, I'm going to give you this water. But if I don't get that napkin, you don't get my water. And that's really the whole purpose behind the contract. And so, not to oversimplify it, but it could literally be that simple. And so cost of goods, right now, that's how things happen with escrow. So if I send you a half a Bitcoin for something in return, then that money goes into escrow until I receive my goods, and then I say, yes, I received my goods, and it releases out of escrow back to you. That's just one of the methods.
That's
There's
a really
multiple
good
different
trick
ways.
for revenue recognition, though. I mean,
It
when you
is.
think about, stocks and all that, being able to trace,
Absolutely.
transaction fulfillment.
So just really quickly to touch on that, transactions are as anonymous as you want them to be to an extent. Okay, so Bitcoin is allocated to an address. Okay, so you create an address, you receive Bitcoin. That address is what holds the private key within a wallet. Okay, so if you have your wallet, you have your Bitcoin. You lose your wallet, there's measures that can be discussed offline. But for the most part, it's like walking into here and
life
forgetting
is
your
over.
wallet here, and you drive home and remember that your wallet was left at the restaurant. Basically the same thing.
Drop it, play
But the big problem is if you die, right?
Yeah.
Your wallet's in your house and your estate is gonna go
Yeah.
and open your wallet. If you do not have a plan as to leveraging the key thereafter, it's gone forever.
When I die, I don't worry about that.
That's a very valid point.
But your heirs,
Well, can the state take it? Like if you don't have a will, the state of Texas can come take your property, or it goes into probate or something? Could that happen? Is there probate with
I
Bitcoin?
don't know the answer to that. Does anybody know anything about the probate?
I heard no.
On
because it's not
Bitcoin?
Nationally recognized.
yes, there is no probate for
Okay.
Bitcoin.
Okay.
Okay, so you better have something written before you die.
There could already be a lot of like,
For 4 more months,
No.
and then you'll be able to use Delaware
What did he
and
say?
Arizona.
You able to use what?
Delaware and Arizona.
What about Delaware and Arizona? You can,
So Delaware is changing all the corporate laws to recognize cyber initiatives, whether it's virtual currencies, virtual companies, virtual identities inside corporations. So it's called the Delaware Initiative. They're rewriting the whole corporate law around what's happening in digital.
And they're the leaders in corporate enablement. Yeah.
Very much so.
oh, wow.
We got a really, really good presentation coming on that next month, which I'll make sure you guys all get.
Right.
Oh, that's just so cool.
Very good. So just really quickly, just want to kind of get your mind thinking in different directions. Some of you already have businesses today that are established. How do you get a product to a service? This will be one method of doing so. And then also just kind of get you thinking about different opportunities and thought processes. So logistics, obviously, we discussed that. Healthcare is the next big one that's being looked at, all the way up to the government level. It's actually being vetted out to see how plausible it is to start putting health records within blockchain.
How do we opt into that? Is there a name for any of that initiative?
Not yet.
That is the
I don't
biggest
know if there's an
problem.
actual name for the initiative
That I would
itself,
totally participate in.
but
It's all on the
there's,
NIH website.
Okay.
And then also if you look at
I'm sure it's-
MedRec at MIT,
Where? Rec?
MEDREC, MedRec,
Okay.
Medical Record, MIT, it's an IEEE project.
Okay.
yes. And that's actually, that's a long-standing project that's been around for a while. So the purpose behind it is now I can have one medical record from beginning to end. So from the time you're born till the time you die, one medical record. Now, obviously, private versus public, we have that conversation all day long. But the whole point behind it is that along the way, medical people have access to data. So if, let's just say that I happen to fall out right here and you had to take me to the hospital, the doctor that I received within the ER, they're not going to know who I am, they're not going to know my medical history, they're not going to know anything about me. But in the future, if they decide to go this way and adopt it, it helps be able to eliminate some of those issues. So if you're looking for a space to start playing in, healthcare is something that is very lucrative right now. So a lot of people that are looking into this, especially with the electronic medical records and the adoption from that perspective. As I mentioned earlier, my wife's a nurse, so I get kind of the inside of what's going on within corporate nursing, if you will. And it's something that's a really big issue, from all the way from the corporate side of things with the registries, being able to get payments, all the way down to the floor of having somebody that comes in and doesn't speak English and trying to figure out what it is and how do you treat this person. So, and in the financial side of things, this is kind of where it all started, and really where it has the biggest amount of adoption from very, very large banks, actually having adopted a blockchain type of, initiative, if you will. Santander, if I'm not mistaken, was the first bank to announce that they had a blockchain initiative, like you could start, they were doing blockchain testing. Most recently, a couple of days ago, there was 4 other large banks. The thing that's kind of interesting is everything's outside the U.S. To my knowledge, the majority of this is taking place outside the U.S., but we need some more development that's here. And this is kind of the whole premise behind bringing this to the forefront and start thinking about things from today forward. Is how can we use this technology to keep up with what the rest of the world's doing? Something very interesting that I was listening to last night is that in India, they pulled the 100 rupee and the 500 rupee bill out of circulation overnight. Done. Game over. And so during that, they were actually interviewing, the name of the company is drawing a
Did they
blank.
just swap it, or did they remove it?
No, removed it. They took it out of circulation,
It's
period.
swapped.
They swap all the old bills for new bills,
ATM
they also took them out of circulation.
They
You didn't
started
trade it
it
for
from
that.
1,000 and they made it
ATM is the
2,000.
one that's now gaining
Yeah.
popularity because the
People having a hard time
that's the only option
changing
for
over.
people to use.
No, no, I
I
understand.
think you're talking about the
Yeah.
program on
Yeah.
NPR, right? The story on your.
Yeah.
No, this was on NPR.
Okay.
But I'll have to go
It was
back. This was
also
actually
NPR.
MSNBC's,
Wedding.
the New York
Can
top.
you start your
their top
story
50.
again?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Can you start your story again?
So so India basically overnight pulled 2 of their large bills out of circulation. There's actually been talks within the U.S. of them doing the exact same thing with the $100 bill and the $50 bill, eventually evolving into pulling the $20 bill out of circulation. The whole point behind it, and this is kind of the argument, was if you look at the way that people use currency today, 9 times out of 10 is what they say. 9 times out of 10, the people that are using the 50s and the 100s are the ones that are doing illegal activity. People that typically have some form of a currency trade or way of spending money, if you will, do it electronically through a debit card, credit card, or small denominations. And so in India, they were just like, we're just pulling the plug. We're a developing country, we've got the opportunity. And so that was the easiest way for them to say, hey, we're not playing games, figure it out. And so now the mobile payments or electronic payments, however you want to look at that, the adoption there is estimated to be 5 years ahead of the US as far as their infrastructure is concerned. Pete?
To follow on that, just, I was at the Secret Service the other day, and the Secret Service runs both the North Texas cybercrime as well as North Texas counterfeit, okay? And the rationale behind that also from the government's perspective is that even though they put in really, really good identifiers, the counterfeiters have gotten so good that they've actually counterfeited the identifiers. So if you actually just take the currency out of circulation, that you actually ensure the surety of the currency.
Yeah. Another
They found
point.
the first counterfeit $5 bills the other day. $5 bills.
Oh, that's crazy.
Cow.
Another point is it costs a lot of money to secure it, the paper, you know, these big trucks, and they have to pay these guys lots of money because their lives are at risk. And they also have to like shred the money when it gets old. I mean, there's a lot of money that goes into managing money. I mean, money as we know it is paper stuff. I don't know if you guys have ever been to, my sister-in-law works at the Federal Reserve downtown. And yeah, she showed me where they shred the money and all this stuff. I was like, you know, that's a lot of, you know, processes, machines, energy. And you think about, you know, all the people that get killed because, you know, they're in doing security, picking up, right. So, I mean, if you were to add all that up, you know, that's a lot of money and time and lives that go into it. So if you were to make it like vaporware or something like that, you would.
So I'm
it
curious,
would
show
be-
of hands, who would operate in a world with no currency?
Oh, I would love it.
With no currency?
No currency.
Yeah.
I do it already. Pretty
Yeah, I
I
pretty
wasn't
much
joking,
do
but
it.
see, a lot of people are not raising their hands.
Yeah.
My dad said I'm not a man unless.
So now we know who money launders in here.
In some countries, it's not possible.
No doubt.
Right, but those are countries that are major trading partners, so you couldn't do that here. Like Japan is in carrying cash.
Let it finish.
Paper money.
We're close to the end. Let's-
Yeah, I was going to say, so just to be respectful of time, we are a few minutes over 9 o'clock. So I want to leave you with some different brainstorming mode, if you will, some different ideas based off of what blockchain or distributed ledger type technology can do for you. And so, you know, just empower you with the knowledge of what's going on. Obviously, there's a great wealth of expertise within this room. Craig and Pete obviously are very in tune with what's going on the currency side as well as what's going on the distributed ledger blockchain side as well. Also, don't forget to use Arrow, obviously for we'll plug there for you know for development kits.
You'll get your Bitcoin later.
That's a half a Bitcoin.
That's a good one.
The check will be in the mail tomorrow.
I heard
The
that.
Bitcoin's check. Yeah, check, that's paper. That's bad for the environment.
Sorry.
Touche. So anyway, I just encourage you, keep an open mind of what's going on. Being on the connectivity and the hardware side for so many years, and then finding out what's happening on the application side of things, it's really refreshing to see truly what is possible from IoT perspective, and how much further we still have yet to go. As I was telling somebody the other day, if you don't invest in Bitcoin, I don't blame you. It's like investing in AOL and thinking that it's going to be the only way of getting to the internet or the World Wide Web back in the 90s. So just keep an open mind, because there are other players that are coming onto the market that are relevant to different business cases that you might come up with. And so with that, just want to say thank you for this morning. Thank you for the time to hear me.
What do you think is driving the Bitcoin prices from $200 last year to almost $1,800? What are the top three factors you think are playing this?
So it changes day by day as to what the speculation is. Right now, it's the uncertainty. So a couple of days ago, what drove a big jump, which obviously everybody thought that it was going to drop, and that was the reason for the comment on Facebook, was there started being a lot of talks around, impeach the president and things, that all of these uncertainties. And people were like, okay, well, obviously there's going to be a drop within the value because typically that's what happens in the market. The market drops when there's uncertainty. Bitcoin actually rose. So it changes. And I think truly the driver behind it is, number one, people playing with it, obviously because it's still in its infancy. So we have a lot of people that are just investing just to see what it does, which I don't condone that by any means because it is real money that you lose. It costs you money to get in, it costs you money to get out. And it's just like the stock market. It does fluctuate and that's real. But as far as what's driving it, there's a lot of different factors, but I'd say number one is uncertainty because it gives almost like a security in the fact that it's not controlled by a government. So whenever you have all the issues going on, now I can invest in something that's not controlled by an entity that I no longer trust. So.
I'd like to bring another, sorry, I'm not trying to take over this thing, but I think when you talk about blockchain and Bitcoin from a financial industry perspective, regulation plays a big role as well. So I didn't see you were talking about the regulation and compliances, but I think it plays a huge role. I'll give you an example. I was reading a case study on one of the companies that does transaction. It's a Bitcoin transaction for the sub-African Sahara region, and they were like in last minute. I mean, they've been running the operation for almost 3 years, but they were pulled out by the government because the transaction value for if I have to send money to one of the regions there, they were costing an individual anywhere between 18 to 28%. So if I have to send $1,000, it's actually going to, part of that will be going to government as well, unfortunately.
But not ministers.
Yes. In this process, what this innovative company was trying to do using Bitcoin as in the back end, the transaction fees would drop from 18% down to 3%, 5%, something like that. And overnight, the government said, you cannot come and play in this region now.
Wow. They're eating into their revenue.
Yeah. So
Yeah, that's terrible.
When you're deploying financial services, you have to be aware of the regulations.
Preserve the government.
We're running through Vodacom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Don't try to cut them out.
Yes, exactly. I'll give them 1%. Tip your tongue.
Yeah, vote for them or something, give them campaign money.
Yeah, but a lot of the fluctuation has to do with the impeachment of Trump, right?
It does. Unfortunately, yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's true. I mean, the Dow just dropped. I mean, people are. That will absolutely make the volatility of the market go like this for the next year.
Yeah,
Well,
but when it was
the
Obama
scarcity
for 8 years, they talked
What?
about uncertainty, so,
Yeah,
everybody's got
exactly.
some.
Well, I'll tell you another run for those 8 years.
Sorry, what? Worked out pretty good.
So on this Bitcoin, I mean, are you assuming there's always going to be some kind of connectivity to the internet or something? Or like say I want to go on vacation to these remote islands in Panama. I guess I was there, I forgot the name of them. But they don't have internet, they don't have electricity. I guess you just pay in advance. You do have what?
They have internet.
They have internet? Like in some of the remote islands?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
You'll
so
be amazed.
okay, so pretty much you're going to be able to use Bitcoin. There's not going to
Worst
be
case, you can get a satellite connection. but-
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, that's probably true.
More maddening is they have better cell phone connections than we do here.
That's probably true. Less congestion.
Great undersea fiber
Type of boss,
connectivity.
because you can, if you have a boss.
If you have a what?
If you have a boss, the idea is you're going away to some remote place. They generally have better connectivity, but we don't want everybody to.
Yeah, okay.
So I got a question. So with the creating the ledger, right? The historical ledger of transactions that happens. Is it that is secure and it can be kind of unwound, or is there an efficiency using distributed ledger for logging transactions in the method of using that itself?
So it being unwound, so the premise behind, so when you create
So is the benefit in that it's secure and encrypted, or is the benefit in the efficiency of storing the historical from a transaction from like the supply chain example?
Initially, it was both. What we're finding out now is efficiency is not necessarily a factor anymore because of all the information that's being passed around. So, yeah, efficiency is not so much. That was the reason for mentioning the other distributed ledger type technologies.
But authenticity is there. That's the key thing, with all the hashing.
Correct.
You know,
Everything is
authenticity.
hashing.
It's not in a more efficient manner.
No, you just know, you can tell if somebody changed it, right?
Maybe they should create a shortcut, like a pointer to the end and the
It's
beginning.
actually the complete lack of trust. Right. It's totally trustless. And everybody knows what everybody's doing. So therefore, there is no question of you doing something that somebody may not know.
You know, whatever.
But it will get like crazy long over a lifetime, I imagine. It would be weird.